to pollutants while you're cycling. You can monitor your torque, so how much torque you apply to the pedal. So your bike becomes like, a little bit like your friend that's helping you to drive and monitoring. If one day, your bike could tell you, is everything good? Today your torque is not as good as it used to be. Maybe you need to go and see the doctor. And by doing this, here is, I'll go very quickly. So it's like packing that into the wheel, the Prius into the wheel, very simplified. You don't need to change anything else into your bike. These are the sensors that will actually monitor your exposure to pollutants. And here is the first video, the first prototype. Hopefully this will be, we are working with BMW now, and the idea is that by the summit at the end of the year, we'll have a number of these bikes shown and presented at the summit and deployed in Copenhagen. The other thing is that it has a locationing sensor, so you can actually do a couple of things. One is that you can link with Facebook. And so we developed this application called I Cross Your Path. So basically, you can see at the end of the day the people you've been crossing path with in Facebook. And the other thing is that you can monitor your green miles, so how many miles you've been doing. So the idea that we propose to the city is, why don't we do a scheme like a frequent flyer? Now, frequent flyer is great. Everybody's excited. We all check our statements. Think about how much CO2 you emit. So you get a lot of gadgets and free flights, but that's a lot of CO2 being emitted into the atmosphere. So what if you do something similar, but it is like a frequent flyer, a green frequent flyer, a sort of green mile scheme, so that you actually monitor how many green miles you do, and then you get rewarded by that. That will have to be discussed, what that is, but it becomes a way to promote even more green and cycling in the city. The final project that I will show you is something we're doing with the city of New York, is about trash. And so, when you go to hospital and you don't feel good, and sometimes they put a tracer into your blood, and then they see how the tracer is moving into your blood, and by doing that, they can see problems that you might have into your body. Well, we want to do the same thing with trash. So we are developing our own little tags that we will put on pieces of trash, on an old computer, on an old TV, on a bottle of water, and we'll put a few thousand of them in the system and then follow them. So we'll follow them and see what goes in the right place, what goes in the wrong place. One of the big problems today with trash is that you got TVs and computers. When they stop working, they're just shipped to Africa, and they will pollute in a field. They will not be properly dismantled and recycled. So it is, how can we use pervasive computing, these little tags that we are developing? We got the first prototype ready, and we are doing the project with Waste Management. It's the largest waste management company in the United States, with Google for tracking the traces, and with AT&T because these little tags work actually on the cell phone network. And so we are hoping really to see, how can we learn more from this and optimize, hopefully optimize our trash collection and removal. And I will finish with this project and now look at a few general things to say, as you see here, this would be like an exhibition, like the Venice Biennale, like the exhibition we had last year at the MoMA in New York. So we usually do research in a slightly unusual way. And we think that this could be interesting people think that this is interesting from the point of view of innovation processes. So what we do, we tend to start with a scenario about a possible future. In this case, it's an urban future. That scenario becomes an exhibition. It can be the Venice Biennale, it can be the MoMA, it can be, in this case, it's the Architecture Foundation in Copenhagen, will be presented at the UN Climate Summit. And then we actually do the technical research in order to achieve that scenario. So the scenario becomes our sort of guiding principles to do the research. And that's why I just want to share with you 3 points of what we sort of have learned in doing this. We are a quite young group because we started like 4.5, 5 years ago, and we've been growing quite fast. So, but the first point is this mixing of methods. So sometimes people come to us and say, so are you doing art projects, or are you doing research, or scientific research? And this is always there. the equations. Also, I'm from MIT, so I always have to have a slide like this, you know, with numbers. But the interesting thing is that when you take that and work with a clear scenario in mind, like in this case, it's a Rome project. This was actually, I didn't show it to you in addition to the funnel, the workup. That summer, we also looked at the Madonna concert, and you know, that was what happened that night in Rome, but very similar to what I showed you about the workup. So this becomes like a future scenarios for the city, and that becomes like an art or architecture exhibition or whatever, a way to show this scenario and inspire people. And then that becomes very interesting to guide the development of the maths behind, or the equations, and what is behind. And actually, this is a quote from David. Actually, it's a quote from our dinner last night. And that was after a few glasses of wine. So, I mean, it might be, I don't know if David will still stand behind it. But, you know, the thing is, for innovation, you need a shared language and the ability to create stories. And we cannot innovate faster than we can create new shared languages. And so by broadcasting ideas, we can speed up innovation. So the fact of creating these scenarios in a certain sense, it's a way for also create a story and transmit it in a more effective way. And, you know, so I mean, it's so we were surprised. We've never done anything with media or promoting the stories. But for instance, the Rome project or some of the other projects have then been sort of taken by hundreds of media. The Economist did 3 pages on Rome and worldwide. So we thought that there's really 3 components in creating this scenario. The first is that it's very helpful for us because it keeps our research focused. And then the second thing is that it helps create narratives. So it helps really seeing the potential applications of the technology in a compelling way. And in that sense, if what David said is true, it sort of helps creating a feedback loop and promote innovation. So you create a language, you can talk about these things, and then this will inspire other people. One interesting thing that came out of the Rome project, and that's why I selected, is that there's now a big startup called the Sense Network. And they told us, you know, they were inspired by the Rome project. And now they are, you know, you might have seen what they're doing. It's that they've been described like the new Google. They try to do this real-time monitor of the city. And so we thought that, you know, we're happy that other people might get inspired by the ideas, do a startup, or start taking it further. The second point I wanted to mention about what we've learned from ourselves is about the mixing of the people. So if you take it a project like the Rome project, and I've taken this as a case study today. So if you look at the people here, Andres is a designer, and Burak is a graphic and computer person. Asaf is a physicist. Francesco is an electrical engineer. Filippo is a sociologist. There's really, the only way you can do a project in this way is if you really put together so many different backgrounds. And here it's part of a broader thing that is happening today. If you look at this picture, 50 years ago, people thought that knowledge could be very well structured. I think it was still a little bit the old dream of St. Thomas, like 500 years ago, that everything would fit in the right spot. Like in a library, you could classify everything. There's this beautiful graph that some of you might have seen. It's from Science magazine. And actually, a guy did something wonderful, to take 800,000 papers, very large amount of papers, and looked at all the connection between scientific papers. And our knowledge today looks much more like this, looks much more amorphous. That's something that has been promoted also by Google, by the way we search for things. There's many more cross-links. If you look at, for instance, how brain research today is connecting to computer science, to math, and to ecology, look at some of those links. There's things that are very surprising. And this is just a map of scientific developed 800,000 scientific papers just mapped together. So this is what's happening today. There was another interesting article that you might have seen. It was in Nature a few months ago about group theory. The bottom line is that if you take the top papers from Nature or from the top scientific magazine journals, 50 years ago, the top ones usually had one